G'day ladies and gents, and welcome to World of Warships with Mags, and I figured it was about time I put some World of Warships gameplay up on the channel, because I have been playing this for over a month now, and I thought we'd jump straight into the deep end with something that you don't really see in a lot of YouTube videos at the moment on World of Warships, and that's carrier gameplay, and I know why that is. World of Warships is a game with some fantastic ship models, and big guns firing, and massive explosions going off on other ships, and it's quite a really good looking game. And carriers are probably the most interesting of all of the ship types that are available in the game to view. Unfortunately, when you're playing a carrier, this is what you see. Carriers require total battlefield situational awareness in order to play, so as a result, you play the entire game from this map view. You don't ever go down to ship view, there is absolutely no need to do so. Well, almost completely from this map view. You do occasionally zoom in to adjust your angle of attack on dive bombers or torpedo bombers, or to just fine-tune your attacks with your aircraft. But this is really as far in as you ever will zoom. So, we're a minute into this match, so I better start explaining what exactly is going on. I'm driving the Tier 5 Bogue Escort carrier. The Bogue class is the second aircraft carrier that you'll unlock in World of Warships, the first being the Langley. It's capable of carrying and deploying 3 wings of aircraft into battle, and it has 3 configuration options for these aircraft. In this battle I'm running the Bogue in what is known as a fighter fit. I'm carrying 2 squadrons of fighters, 1 squadron of dive bombers just for support, and my aircraft carrier is actually configured with a bunch of extra components that enable my fighters to have a larger amount of durability and to do more damage in battle. Now this can be risky to do, because if you run into the unfortunate situation of the enemy team not having any carriers, you find yourself with a carrier that's set up to destroy aircraft on a battle that there's no aircraft to shoot down. Thankfully that's something I didn't have to worry about in this particular battle. Both teams have 2 carriers apiece, and the enemy carriers appear to be both configured for torpedo bombing. So we have had a slightly bad start to the match. The enemy team has taken C and B at the moment. Our team is fighting over and trying to secure A as quickly as they possibly can. We do have destroyers in the vicinity of C, and at the moment that's the area that I'm supporting. Just sending in my dive bomber squadrons. Unfortunately, that's the problem with dive bombers that I have. It's entirely possible for you to send them out to attack a target and have them just miss. Not because the target maneuvered or avoided the shot like what happens with torpedo bombers. The dive bombers will just miss the target, and there's nothing you can do about it. Every time you send dive bombers in to attack a ship, it's RNG. But thankfully dive bombers are not my primary in this match. I'm currently sending my fighters around. I was just making sure I keep my fighters close enough to keep a spot on that enemy destroyer until ships were in position to engage. Ships are now in position. I'm seeing 3 wings of torpedo bombers returning to their carriers just up north, so I'm sending my fighters up there to intercept. Now my goal for this entire battle is to target and eliminate every single enemy squadron that I can find. Primary targets will be torpedo bombers and dive bombers. Taking out any of the enemy team's fighter squadrons will be a secondary, as the fighter squadrons don't pose any direct risk to my ships in the water. So enemy fighters will really only be attacked as a target of opportunity, or if they directly put my aircraft at risk. And the ability to choose to play like this is actually one of the things that makes the carrier so interesting on World of Warships. Every time you encounter a ship type in World of Warships, say you encounter a destroyer, that destroyer's basic operating parameters will be exactly the same as every single other destroyer of its type. The upgrades it has may vary, but the ship itself is going to be capable of exactly the same role, and to do exactly the same job. However, in World of Warships you can encounter a carrier, and one might be set up as mine is, as a pure fighter fit, designed to eliminate enemy teams' aircraft before they have a chance to drop torpedoes and blow your ships up, to dive bomb you, just to shut down enemy carriers and make them obsolete in the map. However, the carrier sitting right next to it, which could be exactly the same class, may be configured for dive bombers. And its squadrons, it may have 1 squadron of fighters for personal defense, but it'll have 2 squadrons of dive bombers that are set up to hit fast-moving destroyers and be able to either critically damage them or destroy them whenever they move to engage any of your heavier shipping. As you see in this match, the carriers on the enemy team are configured almost exclusively for torpedo bombers, designed to take out your larger ships, your battleships and other aircraft carriers. One single ship can be reconfigured for multiple roles in multiple ways, depending entirely on what the player who's driving the ship wants to do. Now, as you can see just there, both my fighter squadrons just bugged out and started heading back towards the carrier. If you look in the bottom center of the screen, you'll actually see a little ammunition icon to the left-hand side of the icons on slots 2 and 3 for my fighters. That's how much ammunition my fighter squadrons are carrying, and they both just ran out of ammunition, which is why they didn't finish off that last enemy fighter squadron. We've eliminated 2 squadrons of torpedo bombers, we've crippled one of their fighter squadrons, we've wiped out multiple other squadrons. At this point, we're up to over 19 air kills, 19 registered at the moment. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to update. And we've got 2 fighter squadrons that are coming back almost undamaged to get new ammo. Now, if you're inexperienced with this game, you might think, well, isn't this all moot point? Won't the enemy carriers just continue spitting out more and more squadrons of aircraft as you eliminate the previous squadrons? No, and that's the thing with World of Warships. Carriers have a limited number of squadrons available on board. You have 1 for each of your slots, and then you have a replacement squadron. That's it. It is entirely possible, if you are very good with an anti-aircraft carrier, to go through and eliminate all of the enemy team's aircraft and have their carrier sitting there absolutely incapable of doing anything else in the match. In fact, that's exactly what I'm going to do in this match. By the end of this, the enemy team is going to have 2 squadrons left on 1 carrier, and the other carrier is actually going to be out of aircraft. So, while my fighter squadrons are actually rearming, time to take out the dive bombers and see whether or not we can do some damage, and we got a nice good hit. And that's it. No critical damage, no fires. That's unfortunate, but all good. As a general rule, what you want to do is hold your dive bombers back for hitting smaller ships, such as destroyers, which will take quite a lot of damage from a dive bomb attack, or for hitting targets that are very low on health. Unfortunately, at this point, there's no visible destroyers, and there's no low health targets, so I just hit whatever was available, because if I don't, the bombs aren't doing damage if they're still attached to the planes. Now, my fighter squadrons have rearmed and are in the process of taking off. 1 squadron is up, 2nd squadron has just taken to the air, and we have enemy torpedo squadrons just to the north of our position, just south of the C marker. Now, we have actually been detected at this point. That torpedo bomber before, as it went past, spotted us, but he didn't turn around to attack us. He's more concerned with the other ships. Now, we have 2 live squadrons of torpedo bombers and 1 squadron of fighters. I need to eliminate the fighter squadron first. If I engage the torpedo bombers with it there, it will be able to come in and basically get unrestricted attacks on my fighter squadrons, and will likely take one of them out before I'm able to take out the torpedo squadron. So quickly throw some ammo at this. It will not take long. Enemy fighter squadron destroyed. Now go after the torpedo bombers. Now, with 2 torpedo squadrons sitting right on top of the target, it's unlikely I'm going to be able to eliminate both before they're able to release torpedoes. So I go after the closest one I can first and try and take it down as fast as I can before it can release. And I'm just hoping the player they're targeting is aware enough of what is going on to be full on the rudder to avoid the torpedoes from the 2nd squadron. And as it turns out, he was. He was full hard right rudder. The 3 torpedoes dropped missed. As soon as the 1st torpedo squadron went down, dropped my fighters onto the 2nd one. That's another torpedo squadron eliminated. That's 27 enemy fighters recorded destroyed so far, and I'm returning both of my squadrons to the carrier. I want them landed and rearmed, ready for the next wave. And if you look towards the northwest corner of the map, you'll see that the enemy carrier that thinks it's hiding behind that center left island, we know he's there, has already deployed 2 additional torpedo bomber squadrons. Once you destroy a squadron, the respawn for that squadron is available after about 10 seconds, and you can redeploy and go through the takeoff procedures and get them back in the air. Unfortunately for him, at this point, he has to be out of respawns, so the planes he has in the air are all he has left. I rearm these fighters. I should have enough on board to go through and shut down the rest of his aircraft before he can do any more damage to the team. So, while my fighter squadrons are rearming, my dive bomber squadron is back up and I'm sending it into the center of B. This will give me a fairly short range to just about any point on the map, and I can try and look for some low health targets to eliminate. I'm also beginning to move my carrier towards B as well. With most of the enemy dive bomber and torpedo bomber squadrons eliminated, most of the enemy ships are currently isolated in over at A. We have B and C secured, I have ships in support, and I have aircraft in the area. I'm pretty safe to move my ship up into the center of the map, using it as a forward flak position, and use it to make sure that we keep our center cap point secure. Moving my carrier closer to the battlefield also shortens the return flight time for my fighters when they're out, so their reload times will be much quicker and I can get them back into the fight faster. And at this point the enemy team must be furious. They've got 5 ships up total, the same as us. However, 2 of their ships are aircraft carriers, and those aircraft carriers are just about out of aircraft, so it's really a 3-on-4 fight here. I take myself out of my team's equation, of course, as I have a very limited ability to actually damage ships. Speaking of which, my dive bomb is just about in position, and I have a destroyer that I can hit this time, so adjusting my angle of attack on it. This is done by moving the little arrow marker around the outside of the rotary wheel. Once the fighter gets into position on that little arrow, the marker turns yellow, and that means the dive bomb is committed. At that point you can't change it anymore. And we get a nice solid hit, critical strike, set fire, and a target hit marker, so that was nice. Now, at some point in the last couple of minutes, we've actually lost our team's other carrier. So if you're wondering when you see the map why the torpedo bombers and the dive bombers are just circling on the left-hand side, that's because the player that controls them has been eliminated and they no longer have a place to return to. So my fighter squadrons are rearmed and back in the air, and that's another enemy dive bomber squadron eliminated. That's brought me up over 30 kills, and I've just gotten the achievement Clear Sky, which is for destroying in excess of 30 aircraft. But I'm not quite done with the enemy's fighters yet. Enemy's got a torpedo squadron coming in on C. My fighters are already set to intercept. 33 recorded air kills at this time. Now while I'm zoomed in, I am keeping an eye on the map at the moment, and there does appear to be a destroyer that's making a move on B, or lurking around on the islands on our side of the map, between B and C. So I'm going to have to get my dive bomber squadron up as soon as it's rearmed and head him over in that direction and see if we can deal with him, because he's probably the most dangerous ship on the enemy team to me at the moment. Destroyers will actually make incredibly short work of carriers if you let them get close. So my fighter squadrons have caught up with the enemy torpedo squadron and have started engaging. They're starting to shoot down the aircraft. It won't take long now. These things are set up to kill torpedo bombers in a real hurry, and there we go, another torpedo squadron eliminated. I have to say I was actually really impressed with the composure of the enemy team's carrier drivers. As I'm sure you can tell, this is not the first time that I've done this before, and as a general rule, by this point, chat is normally a toxic mess of rage and insults from the enemy carrier drivers, as everything that they send into battle just gets eliminated. Now, that enemy destroyer to the south has disappeared, and I do want to know where that is. I was originally going to send my fighter squadrons home for a rearm, but I changed course and send them both down south to use them as scouts to find that destroyer. My dive bomber is rearmed. Once I've located it, I'll launch the dive bomber and send it on its way. And I'm glad I actually diverted off, because another enemy torpedo squadron has appeared from the north. As soon as I've located the enemy destroyer, I'll immediately turn both of my fighter squadrons around and send them straight back after that torpedo bomber squadron. And this is actually one of the really cruel parts of using a carrier this way, and something that I've never really seen in another game of this type before. It's one thing to target and eliminate an enemy's ship or an enemy's vehicle, taking them out of the match, and that can be quite annoying, as I'm sure most people watching this have experienced. But this is taking it a step further. I'm not just eliminating the enemy ship, I'm leaving him completely undamaged and in the match, and just rendering everything he does in the match entirely irrelevant. And that's another enemy torpedo squadron eliminated, and my dive bombing squadron is coming in. I can't see the destroyer, but I know where it was, and I know where it will be heading. Now both of my fighter squadrons are just about out of ammunition again, so I'm pulling them back to the carrier. I don't expect the enemy team has a whole lot of fighters left to deploy, but I better rearm them anyway. Dive bombers in the area now, just trying to hunt down this destroyer. Now, the enemy team only has 3 ships left in the match. One of them is a destroyer that is just south of A, which means we know that at least one of the 2 enemy carriers is currently sitting in the cap circle at C, trying to cap it out. I've just located the enemy destroyer and I'm lining up my dive bombers, just getting the arrow in position. That'll do nicely. And will this be enough to take it out? It's a big hit. It's set on fire. Will the fire be enough? It doesn't matter. Takes a shot from the left-hand side. One of our cruisers, I think. Actually, I think that shot came from our battleship. And it was about here I recognised the torpedo warning. That means my carrier's under attack, and I take my first hit from the game, and I take a hit from a dive bomber at the same time. Divert off my fighters. One of them was already in landing profile. The second one was able to put a few shots in. and the match ends before the second wave of torpedoes come in. Now that little attack at the end then was the combined total of enemy aircraft that both the enemy carriers had remaining. I probably should have seen that one coming. With one of the carriers sitting on C and me being so close to C, I should have kicked the throttles up to maximum and pushed my ship straight into B to prevent the attack. But it didn't really matter in the long run. The enemy team simply didn't have enough dive bombers and torpedo bombers left at the end of the match to be able to take me out in a single hit. So, 152,208 credits, 1,855 research on my carrier, and 91 free research, plus the Clear Skies award. 3 dive bomb target hits, 48 aircraft shot down, 1 critical hit, and 2 targets set on fire. And those 48 destroyed aircraft brought me to 3rd place on my team for experience earned, with 1,237 base experience total. And it definitely was those 48 aircraft kills that did this, because my 3 direct hits on bombs only resulted in 2,723 damage total, and the fires that I started up only did an additional 92 damage. All that XP was based around destroying enemy aircraft in large numbers and shutting down the enemy team's ability to attack from the air. What's really interesting is that little attack right in the last seconds of the match, the enemy team put almost 7,000 damage on my carrier. So they did 3 times the damage in just a few seconds than I was able to do to their ships for the entire match. But anyways, ladies and gents, that is some Tier 5 US carrier gameplay from the Bogue Escort carrier. Hope you enjoyed the video. Click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more. Fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.